The Tommy Thing, written by Noah1608. The flickering glow of lit-up jack-o'-lanterns fills the rainy street with a crazed and dancing light. Long gone are the friends of the solitary boy walking quickly down the empty road. Stuffed to the brim with candy, a space-themed pillowcase hangs over his shoulder, jostling gently with each step taken. A few pieces jar loose and tumble to the ground, much to the boy's dismay. "Crap!" he whispers, bending over quickly to retrieve the lost treats. Filling his bag this full sure seemed like a good idea when he was on the parade with his friends. But now he's got to carry all this weight home. He considers unwrapping one of the pieces that fell, but he can hear his mother's promise in the back of his head. She promised him a piping hot mug of apple cider, not the store-bought stuff, but the fresh stuff from the market, if he refrains from stuffing himself with chocolates during his trick-or-treating. He knows deep down she would have the mug ready for him if he ate the chocolates or not, but the idea of pleasing his mother brings him some happiness. A slight grin cracks across his face at the thought of that hot drink after this cold, cold walk. The sound of a twig breaking in the nearby trees sobers him a little bit. He hates this part of Halloween, always has. All of his friends live close to town and within about 4 blocks of one another, while his house stands as an outlier about an extra 5 or so blocks away. And he's got to walk alongside this creepy forest. He's enjoyed many a trek through those woods, but either alone during the daylight or with his buddies at night, there's an enjoyable thrill to be had when you're scared among friends. But now, he's just scared. He turns his eyes away from the trees to check out any decorations on the houses. A lot of people in town put at least a minimal effort towards Halloween decorations. Sometimes a fake spider or two and an accompanying fake web will adorn the hedgerows, but these homes are mostly bare, with the exception of a few jack-o'-lanterns keeping watch over select porches. The hollowed-out eyes of the pumpkins seem to follow him as he scans the row. Now he looks back across the road into the forest that lines the street. A shift in the wind sends a shiver down his spine, and he snaps his head back forward. "Just keep walking. You're almost there," he assures himself as his feet scrape loudly against the wet concrete sidewalk. A slight flicker of the street lamps halts him. Muscles tensed, he scampers forward through the night, uncomfortably frightened at this point. A strong, cold breeze brings a few tears to the corner of his eyes, and the trees rustle and moan in the wind. As he continues forward, so does the rustling of the leaves. The rustling grows faster. It grows nearer. Goosebumps erupt over his arms, legs, and neck. He tries desperately to keep his emotions under control, but he can feel the tears coming. Why did his house have to be this far away from everyone else's? Another twig snaps in the woods, and a sob escapes the boy's lips as he further accelerates his pace. Another strong gust of wind howls through the air, and a sole wind spinner in an adjacent yard begins to jingle discordantly. The boy's speed walk has now transformed into an all-out sprint. He squeezes his eyes tight as he runs because he mustn't look back at those trees, back at the row of houses, or at the dark road he travels. It would be too much. Candy begins to pour out of his pillowcase, leaving a breadcrumb trail of cellophane wrappers behind him. The sack of treats is now bouncing painfully off of his back, but he doesn't stop running. He's sure that whatever horrible creature trails him would send him into some state of paralyzed terror if he dares to behold it. As he blindly runs, he grows ever closer to the curb that separates the sidewalk and street. About half a foot in depth, he would undoubtedly fall if he veers off of it unknowingly. And fall he does. His right foot lands on the opposite side of the small ledge, and he stumbles and pinwheels his arms, trying desperately to regain his balance, his candy bag sailing over his head. He lands hands first onto the ground, panting and shaking. The sight of his hard-earned bounty scattered over the wet and leaf-strewn street wells his eyes up with tears. All of the night's fun has suddenly vanished, much like the puffs of vapor his short and panicked breaths are creating in the frigid night air. Condensation, the boy thinks to himself. He had learned that term, along with a few others, in his science class earlier today, when his teacher held a class in the schoolyard to explain this foggy breath phenomenon. He and his friends pretended to smoke cigars while the teacher wasn't looking, and got a stern telling off when they were finally caught. A number of forbidden words were used to describe that teacher when they all walked back from the school together, and they laughed all the way home. If only his teacher, or any adult really, was here now. If only anyone was here now, he thinks, and the boy weeps. For the lost candy, he cries. For the fear of the forest, he cries. And for the mental image of his loving mother awaiting his arrival, perhaps with a steaming mug of cider now growing cold, he cries. The rustling in the trees grows louder now, and more violent in nature. Then it stops. The light pitter-patter of the rain bouncing off the sidewalk, and the slightly louder tapping sounds of the water hitting his plasticky hood are the only things the boy can hear. Slowly, he turns his tearful gaze toward the forest. A pair of bright white eyes stare back. He freezes, his mouth agape and his pupils dilated. He blinks, and a voice, strangely familiar, emanates from the trees. "Charlie? You dropped your cape at the last house we treated from." The voice calls out. He squints, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it's difficult in such heavy rain. "Hello?" he calls out tentatively, his voice quavering and reedy. His friend Tommy emerges, quite drenched, holding a black cape. A ragged breath of relief escapes the boy, Charlie. It was just his friend all along. After all, Tommy's house is right through those woods. He cuts through there sometimes when they hang out. The moonlight flashes off of Tommy's eyes, and a white glare passes over them. "Why did you chase me through the woods, you idiot?" Charlie exclaims, his voice still shrill. Tommy grins, holding out the cloak in one hand. "Sorry, I just wanted to catch you before you got home. I had to take the shortcut." "Well, next time at least call out or something," Charlie mumbles, looking down, now ashamed of his intense, fearful reaction. Clearly, he had let Halloween get the better of him this year. But as he flicks his eyes back up towards Tommy, now mere feet away from the edge of the forest, he sees something's horribly wrong. Tommy's eyes are deeply sunken into his skull. His arms and legs are skeletal in nature, and he stands about 2 feet taller than he usually would. "Wouldn't want you to lose your costume," the Tommy thing croons. As it finishes articulating the final word, it opens its mouth, and its jaw begins to drop. Wider and wider, its soundless scream grows. A guttural wail roars from the horrible black chasm that was once Tommy's mouth. Charlie can't move. He can hear someone screaming, but a thick static of pure terror clouds all of his senses.
"What's the matter, Charlie? Is something wrong?"
It shrieks in a tone of exaggerated concern as it continues to grow in size. All 8 feet of the Tommy thing emerge from the trees, gangly limbs crackling and crunching as it moves. Charlie screams as he's hoisted up into the air. He screams as the creature takes him far back into the woods. and he screams as he's lifted up to the creature's head, where those bright white eyes drain the very life out of him. He falls silent as he's dropped onto the leaf-strewn forest floor. The night is cold, and a fog hovers over the accursed soil. 1 minute, the boy is still there. Then, as the fog rolls over and dissipates into the night air, he's not. In a nearby home, the worried pacing of the dark silhouette of Charlie's mother is projected through the lit-up windows. Back and forth she walks across the living room, growing more worried about her Charlie by the second. As the night grows later, it grows colder, as does the now forgotten mug of hot cider sitting on the marble kitchen counter. Charlie's discarded candy bag was found later that night.